I never thought a late-night trip to Walmart would be the most terrifying experience of my life. It all started innocently enough, just a quick run to pick up some groceries for my family. Living in a quiet suburb of Jacksonville, Florida, I often shopped at night to avoid the crowds. It was peaceful, walking through the aisles when the store was nearly empty, just me and a few night owls wandering around. But that night, things didn't go as planned. It was around 11 p.m. when I pulled into the parking lot. The store was open 24 hours, and it wasn't unusual to see a few scattered cars, mostly belonging to late-night workers and shoppers like me. But as I parked my car, I noticed something strange. A beat-up, black van parked a few rows down. The van didn't stand out much at first, but what caught my attention was the man sitting in the driver's seat. He wasn't doing anything, just staring blankly at the entrance of the store, almost as if he were waiting for someone. I shrugged it off. After all, people do all sorts of weird things in parking lots. I grabbed my shopping list, locked the car, and made my way inside. The moment I stepped through the automatic doors, I felt an odd chill run down my spine. The store was eerily quiet, more so than usual. Normally, there were at least a few employees restocking shelves or working at the registers, but tonight it seemed deserted. Only a single cashier was stationed at the front, her face buried in her phone. I didn't think much of it at the time and grabbed a cart, heading toward the produce section. As I moved through the aisles, gathering fruits and vegetables, the unsettling feeling grew stronger. It was the kind of sensation that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end. I told myself I was being paranoid. It was just a quiet night, that's all. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him. The man from the van. He was standing at the end of the aisle, staring directly at me. He was tall and thin, wearing an old, worn-out hoodie with the hood pulled up, casting a shadow over his face. His hands were stuffed deep into the pockets of his jeans, and he didn't move. Just watched. My heart skipped a beat. It's not uncommon to see other people shopping late at night, but the way he was standing there, motionless and silent, gave me the creeps. I pretended not to notice him and pushed my cart further down the aisle, trying to stay focused on my shopping. I needed to pick up some pasta and sauce from the next section, so I hurried along, hoping to lose him in the aisles. But when I turned the corner into the pasta aisle, he was there again, standing at the far end. My heart began to race. Was he following me? It seemed too coincidental. But then again, maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me. Maybe he was just shopping like anyone else. I took a deep breath and tried to ignore him, grabbing the pasta I needed and throwing it into the cart. I was just about to leave the aisle when he started walking toward me. Slow, deliberate steps that echoed in the empty store. My mind raced. Should I confront him? Ask if he needed something? Or should I just leave? Before I could make a decision, he spoke. "Excuse me." His voice was low, almost a whisper. "Can you help me find something?" I froze, gripping the handle of my cart tightly. My instincts screamed at me to get out of there, but I didn't want to be rude. Maybe he really did need help. Sure, I replied hesitantly, trying to keep my voice steady. "What are you looking for?" His lips curled into a small, unsettling smile. "I'm looking for something special." There was something off about the way he said it, the way his eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I forced a nervous laugh and took a step back. "Well, I'm not sure I can help with that," I said quickly. "Maybe you should ask one of the employees." Without waiting for a response, I turned my back on him and pushed my cart down the aisle as fast as I could without breaking into a run. My mind was racing, and all I wanted was to get out of that store. I still had a few more items to grab, but at that point, I didn't care. I could feel his eyes on me, and every instinct in my body told me that I needed to leave. As I made my way to the front of the store, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. I glanced over my shoulder, and sure enough, he was there. He wasn't even trying to hide it now. He was following me, his steps quickening as I moved closer to the exit. Panic set in. I abandoned my cart near the registers and made a beeline for the doors. My heart was pounding in my chest as I stepped out into the cool night air, and I hurried toward my car, my keys already in hand. But as I approached my car, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The black van was still there, and now the back door was open. Standing next to the van was another man, dressed similarly to the first. Hoodie pulled up, face obscured. He was holding something in his hand, something metallic that gleamed under the parking lot lights. A crowbar. I stopped in my tracks, my mind racing. What were they planning? Were they waiting for me? My breath caught in my throat as the first man stepped out of the store behind me. They were working together. This was planned. Without thinking, I turned and ran. My legs moved faster than they ever had, and I sprinted across the parking lot toward the street. I could hear footsteps behind me, heavy and fast, and I knew they were chasing me. My lungs burned and my heart pounded in my ears, but I couldn't stop. I had to get away. I reached the edge of the parking lot, panting and gasping for breath. There was a small gas station just across the street, and I made a desperate dash for it, praying that someone would be there. I didn't dare look back, afraid of what I might see. The gas station was empty except for the attendant behind the counter. I burst through the door, startling the young man, and slammed the door shut behind me. "Call the police!" I shouted, my voice shaking. "There are 2 men chasing me!" The attendant's eyes widened, and he immediately grabbed his phone, dialing 911. I collapsed against the counter, trying to catch my breath as I listened to the distant wail of sirens approaching. By the time the police arrived, the men were gone. The van had disappeared from the parking lot, and there was no sign of them anywhere. The officers took my statement and reviewed the security footage from Walmart, but there was nothing conclusive. They hadn't been able to identify the men, and there were no clear shots of their faces. For weeks, I couldn't shake the fear that they were still out there, waiting for me to slip up. Every time I went to Walmart, I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see them lurking in the shadows. Eventually, the terror faded, but the memory of that night never left me. To this day, I still wonder what they were planning. Was I just in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or was it something more sinister? I guess I'll never know. But one thing's for sure, I'll never shop at Walmart after dark again. I had been working the night shift at the Walmart Supercenter in Houston, Texas for nearly a year. I started the job to help pay off my student loans, and the overnight hours worked perfectly with my schedule. At first, the shifts were uneventful. Long stretches of stocking shelves, tidying up the store, and the occasional late-night shopper asking for help finding something. But over time, I started noticing that working those graveyard hours wasn't just physically draining. It was downright eerie. The Supercenter was open 24/7, but after 11 p.m., the store would clear out until it was almost empty. There were usually only a few workers, a security guard who mostly sat near the entrance, and maybe 1 or 2 stragglers wandering the aisles. The lights inside the store, though always on, seemed dimmer at night, and the air conditioning made the massive space feel cold and sterile. One particular night, things started off normal. It was around midnight, and I was assigned to restock the back aisles: home goods, pet supplies, and cleaning products. I grabbed my U-boat cart loaded with boxes from the back room and started my routine, cutting open boxes, placing products on the shelves, and moving on to the next section. The store was unusually quiet that night. Usually, you'd hear the hum of conversation between workers, the beeping of registers, or the occasional announcement over the intercom. But tonight, it was dead silent, except for the occasional squeak of my cart's wheels echoing through the empty aisles. I was stocking shelves in the cleaning supplies section when I first noticed it. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure standing at the far end of the aisle. It was a man, tall, wearing a long black coat with a hood pulled up over his head. He was standing completely still, just watching me. My first thought was that he was probably a late-night shopper, maybe someone who wandered in looking for something, but the way he stood there, not moving, unsettled me. "Can I help you?" I called out, trying to sound casual, though my voice trembled slightly. No response. The man just kept standing there, staring. His face was mostly hidden under the hood, but I could see the gleam of his eyes catching the fluorescent lights. I swallowed hard, telling myself it was nothing, that he was just some weird customer. After all, it wasn't uncommon for strange people to wander in during the night. Maybe he was just looking for something specific. But then he started walking toward me. His steps were slow, deliberate. The way he moved, it felt like he had all the time in the world, like he wasn't in any rush. My heart began to race, and I took a step back, my hands gripping the edge of the cart. "Sir, if you need help finding something, I can call one of the front desk workers," I said, trying to maintain some composure. He still didn't answer, just kept coming closer. By the time he was halfway down the aisle, I couldn't take it anymore. I abandoned my cart and walked quickly toward the front of the store. As I rounded the corner of the aisle, I glanced back to see that he had stopped and was just standing there watching me leave. I went straight to the front desk where Sharon, the cashier on duty, was working. She was scrolling through her phone, oblivious to what had just happened. "Hey Sharon, did you see that guy?" I asked, my voice shaky. She looked up at me, puzzled. "What guy?" I quickly explained what had just happened, describing the man in the black coat and how he had been acting. Sharon shook her head. "I haven't seen anyone come in for at least an hour. Are you sure it wasn't just another worker?" I frowned. "No, I'm sure. He was wearing a long black coat and he didn't say anything. He just stood there." Sharon shrugged. "Maybe it's someone from the back room playing a prank. You know how those guys are." I wasn't convinced, but I didn't want to sound paranoid. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was just some guy messing with me. I tried to shake it off and get back to work, but the uneasy feeling lingered in the back of my mind. I returned to the aisle where I had been stocking shelves, but when I got there, the man was gone. I breathed a sigh of relief, grabbed my cart, and moved to the next section, hoping that would be the last I'd see of him. Hours passed, and the store grew even quieter as the night dragged on. By 2 a.m., I was working alone in the electronics section. The security guard had wandered off to the back somewhere, and Sharon was at the front, probably still glued to her phone. I was unpacking a shipment of headphones when I heard it. A slow, deliberate tapping sound. It echoed faintly through the empty aisles. At first, I thought it was just the sound of the air conditioning kicking in, or maybe some equipment in the back making noise. But then I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. It sounded closer this time, like it was coming from the next aisle over. I froze, listening intently. The tapping stopped for a moment, and then there was the sound of footsteps. Slow, measured footsteps. My breath caught in my throat. I grabbed my phone from my pocket instinctively and shined the flashlight down the aisle. The bright beam cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but shelves filled with electronics. But then the footsteps started again. I slowly made my way toward the end of the aisle, heart pounding in my chest. As I peeked around the corner, my blood ran cold. There he was, the same man in the black coat, standing in the middle of the aisle, facing away from me. He wasn't moving, just standing there, perfectly still. I backed up, my hands trembling as I dialed Sharon's number. I couldn't leave the electronics section without passing by him, and I wasn't about to risk walking past this creep again. "Sharon," I whispered into the phone. "He's back. The guy I told you about. He's here in the electronics section." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Sharon's voice came through, confused and concerned. "I'm calling security. Stay where you are." I didn't need to be told twice. I pressed myself against the shelves, phone still in hand, waiting for the sound of footsteps, any sign that help was coming. But before anyone could arrive, the man suddenly turned around. I froze. His face was partially hidden by the hood, but I could see his eyes, cold, dark, and filled with something that made my skin crawl. He didn't say a word, just stood there, staring at me like he was studying me, deciding what to do next. I backed up slowly, never taking my eyes off him, and then he took a step forward, and another, and another. He was moving faster now, closing the distance between us. Panic surged through me, and I bolted down the aisle, running as fast as I could toward the front of the store. I didn't stop until I reached the customer service desk, where Sharon and the security guard were waiting. I turned to look behind me, but the man in the black coat was gone, vanished like he had never been there. Security searched the store that night, but they didn't find anyone. No one saw the man leave, and the cameras didn't capture anything unusual. To this day, I don't know who he was or what he wanted, but one thing's for sure, I never worked another night shift at Walmart again. I live in Orlando, Florida, and like many people, I often end up doing my grocery shopping at Walmart. I'm usually there late at night when the store is less crowded. I never thought anything of it. It's quiet, quick, and I can get in and out without waiting in long lines. But one particular night changed the way I feel about Walmart forever. It was a Thursday night around 11 p.m. when I decided to head to the Walmart Supercenter on East Colonial Drive. I needed a few things for the house, so I figured I'd get it done before the weekend rush. I parked in the nearly empty lot, grabbed a cart, and started my routine. The fluorescent lights flickered slightly as I made my way through the aisles, grabbing milk, bread, and some snacks. As I reached the frozen food section, I noticed a man lingering near the freezer doors. He was tall, with a scruffy beard, and wearing an old, oversized hoodie. I didn't think much of it at first, just another late-night shopper like me. But when I glanced back a minute later, I noticed he wasn't grabbing anything. He was just standing there, watching me. I felt a bit uneasy, but brushed it off and moved to the next aisle, hoping he would go about his business. As I reached the cereal section, I saw him again, standing at the end of the aisle, pretending to browse the shelves. This time, his eyes followed me as I walked past. My heart started to race, and I felt my hands get clammy on the handle of the cart. I quickly finished gathering the last few items on my list, trying to shake off the growing sense of dread. As I turned the corner towards the checkout, I saw him again, this time much closer. He was standing by the candy racks near the self-checkout, pretending to look at something. My instincts kicked in. This wasn't a coincidence. I quickly loaded my items onto the self-checkout conveyor belt, scanning each item as fast as I could while keeping an eye on him. He hadn't moved. He was just standing there, staring. I fumbled with my credit card, the machine beeping impatiently as I tried to finish the transaction. My only thought was to get out of there as fast as possible. As I bagged my groceries, I saw him start to walk towards the exit. I breathed a small sigh of relief, thinking he was leaving. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed him stop just outside the sliding doors. He wasn't leaving. He was waiting. I hesitated, debating whether I should ask the cashier for help or just make a run for it. I decided to stay calm. I didn't want to panic for no reason. Maybe he was just heading in the same direction, I told myself. But as I pushed my cart towards the exit, my stomach dropped. He was still there, leaning against the wall, watching me. I pushed through the sliding doors and headed straight for my car. My heart was pounding, and I could feel his eyes on me the whole time. I didn't dare look back. As I loaded my groceries into the trunk, I noticed movement in the reflection of my rearview mirror. He was walking towards me. I slammed the trunk shut, jumped into the driver's seat, and locked the doors. My hands were shaking as I fumbled to start the car. Just as the engine roared to life, he stopped, just a few feet from my window, staring at me through the glass. His face was expressionless, but his eyes told a different story, a cold, calculating look that sent chills down my spine. I didn't wait to find out what he wanted. I threw the car into reverse and sped out of the parking lot, my tires screeching as I peeled out of there. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. He was still standing there, in the middle of the parking lot, watching my car disappear into the night. I got home safe that night, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he had been following me. For weeks after, I avoided that Walmart altogether, opting to shop at a different location during the day. Even now, every time I pull into a Walmart parking lot, I can't help but glance over my shoulder, just in case. That night changed me. It reminded me that no matter how ordinary things may seem, danger can be lurking when you least expect it.